Hollow Knight's Silksong finally got a release date, and I, like everyone and their mother, decided it was a relevant time to go back and replay the first Hollow Knight, except this time I platinumed it. I got 112% completion, filled out every journal entry, defeated the legendary Pantheon boss rushes of the gods, and watched a mushroom blast off into space like Team Rocket on a bad trip. It took 36 hours all told, and it was a blast from start to mostly finish. I never reviewed this game back in the day, but I'm doing it now in the year 2025, where this 8-year-old game has managed to endure as a 2D Metroidvania classic, the likes of which we can only hope are matched or even eclipsed by its incoming sequel, which releases tomorrow as I'm speaking these words, so we'll know real damn quick. Whether you're initiated or let's get to talking about this game. Hollow Knight is a 2D action Metroidvania with platforming elements. You run, jump, swing your sword, aka nail, and use gradually earned abilities for combat and traversal to access previously inaccessible areas. It's simplistic evolution. Your basic attack is just a single strike in whichever cardinal direction you aim with no combos to speak of, but you'll unlock charms, spells, abilities, and arts that gradually take root in the combat system and create fertile ground for expansion. Are you mostly just pressing square the whole time in battle? Generally. But with the focus in boss battles, for instance, being primarily on dodging and positioning, the mashing that accompanies it feels more intentioned and purposeful. You had to do some weaving and dancing and ducking to get that 3-hit opening, so it constantly feels rewarding to see those hits register, and the skill ceiling can still be high because of just how precise and refined your movement and opening maximization can get. I had to refight early game bosses during my Pantheon runs dozens of times, more on that later, and even in the double digits, I was finding new little ways to get one extra hit in or create windows for damage I never previously thought possible, though that was out of necessity or else my brain would have turned to mush from that mindless horseshit. The point is, the combat is always enjoyable as long as you're experiencing something new with it, despite there being no weapon variety to speak of. You've got your nail like Sora has his keyblade, and it's gonna take a beating. Weapon variety is not something I miss in this game, though. Since I went the extra mile and platinumed Hollow Knight, all of its flaws were revealed to me, as they always are in games when you have to spend an extended amount of time doing everything they have to offer, and I want to talk about those in this section. This game gets no shortage of glazing from everybody, and it's well deserved because it's fantastic. But there are still gripes I have that I wish to put out there. Gripe number 1, the double jump. A ways into your adventure, you'll get the moth wings, which allow you to double jump with a flap of their wings. And at first you're like, hell yeah, a double jump! Always a straight upgrade in any game. But this double jump functions a little differently in a way that when it comes to precise platforming challenges, I utterly despise. It's not instant. This isn't as noticeable when you activate it while still traveling upwards, but if you're falling and you press X, there's a couple frames where the wings are out but you're not going up yet, and your downward trajectory stays downward for a split second. Basically, it's a laggy jump. And if you've ever done any of the platforming challenges in this game, you have landed on spikes that you totally didn't land on because you input the double jump well before you should have hit them, and your character looks at the screen with his wings out like, why the hell did this happen? I'm double jumping right now. This mechanic alone handed me a dozen resets in Path of Pain, which is the hardest platforming challenge in Hollow Knight, and if you're going to have challenges that difficult, it's not great when they're designed around fatally flawed mechanics. For reference, here's a list of revered platforming games that have double jumps that come out instantly like they're supposed to. Almost all of them. End of list. My other big gripe, because there's mainly just the two, is the aforementioned Godmaster update, which is what added the boss rush Pantheon, specifically Pantheon 5, which is where I think they went a little too insane with it. Pantheons 1 through 4, great job, no notes. Pantheon 5, however, is simply Pantheons 1 through 4 again, but in a row, and then with another group of the hardest bosses in the game tacked on, including souped-up versions you never fought in the base game before. That is 42 bosses in a row, and if you die to any of them, you have to start all the way over. This isn't necessary to beat the game, but it's necessary for the platinum, and it's a waste of everyone's time because of how it's set up. There are rest areas after a certain amount of bosses where you can heal and change your charm loadout, but you can't save the game there, exit, and come back in where you were. You'll have to start the whole Pantheon over. And because those spots even exist, it's not like a true boss rush anyway, so I don't understand why they don't let you start from the last group of bosses you were on that you didn't manage to beat. If you take Kingdom Hearts, for example, just to make a second KH reference, Olympus Coliseum has a 50-round tournament you have to beat, but after every 10 rounds, if you die, you can start the tournament from the nearest 10th spot. You die on seed 35, you can start from seed 40 instead of back at the beginning at seed 50, which as you can imagine would get unimaginably boring after a while, especially since 35 out of 42 bosses in Hollow Knight are a cakewalk by the time you get to this point. I spend the first 30 minutes of each Pantheon attempt drooling with my eyes glazed over, walking into the bosses, mashing square, and letting myself get hit because who gives a shit, I'll just heal at the end. There is nothing to be gained by forcing me to do this dozens of times before the bosses that matter show up. It's not a test of endurance if I'm expending no energy, and the pride to be had in conquering it only comes from the last 4 or 5 bosses of the Pantheon anyway. I'm not plowing my way through Moss Charger for the 15th time thinking, wow, this is going to be so rewarding later. It's struggling for struggling's sake, and it didn't have to be this way. We're all just as good at the game if we beat Markoth, Zote, False Champion, Nightmare King Grim, Pure Vessel, and Absolute Radiance back to back, versus doing that at the ass end of 35 pushovers. I'd have done some cloud save shenanigans in a second and put myself before the last group of bosses, but it wouldn't let me do that either, because the game never saves during a Pantheon, so there's nothing to upload. I'm just saying this challenge could have taken 7 or 8 less hours if the game respected your time at all, and that's time I could have spent watching Yu-Gi-Oh! GX like a normal 31-year-old. But I'm not Jeremiah, so enough lamentations. Let's get to the game graph, where we're judging story, graphics, mechanics, and fun as separate categories, culminating in an overall score at the end, starting with story. Hollow Knight's story is in a similar vein to Dark Souls and the like, where most stuff is implied or explained very cryptically, and then it's your job to watch a lore video on YouTube if you feel like caring even a little bit. I don't, particularly. You can see that the lore is deep, and if you want to dive into that, you'll probably have a nice, intriguing time, but it's not necessary. And I play this game for the gorgeous visuals, beautiful music, enthralling exploration, and frantic combat. I have a vague idea of why I'm doing what I'm doing, but it's fun enough on its own to not matter, so I give story an NA, which does not positively or negatively affect its overall score. Next is graphics, and boy, if this isn't one of the most strikingly delightful indie games to look at. The environments, the art design, you've got simplistic character models, but they really pop against the super detailed and moody, elegant backdrops. If anything, the contrast enhances the visuals. Even stereotypically bland level themes like sewers or wastelands are made to look fresh and interesting. My favorite areas are the Crystal Caves and the Hive. The vibes are just immaculate. I give graphics a 95. Now we have mechanics, and while I love way more things about it than not, I did just remember one thing I do not like about this game that I hope Silksong changes, and that's the map system. In Hollow Knight, each area has its own map that you don't have right away when you venture into it. Instead, you have to locate the cartographer and buy a partial map off him, not even the whole thing, or if he's not there, you have to go back to the main hub area and buy it from the map store. That's fine. You get a partial map and then you map the rest yourself. That's fine, although you have to buy an item to allow you to do that, which I don't like, but whatever. However, by default, even if you have a map for an area, you cannot see your own location on it. Unless you've completely memorized every screen of an area, you'll have no idea where you are in it. It's like trying to find a specific store in a mall without any information kiosks. Now, Hollow Knight has these things called charms that you can equip that take up a certain amount of charm slots, and as long as you have enough slots, you can equip whatever charms. One of those charms shows you where you are on the map, but it costs 1 charm slot, and it is so necessary that it's basically -1 slot for the rest of the game. It's like when you play Demon Souls or Dark Souls, I forget which, and there's only 2 ring slots, and one of the rings you do basically has to be the one that lowers your hollowing, otherwise you're playing with half HP the whole game. It gives you effectively 1 ring slot to play with, and it feels so restrictive. This is not as bad as that, but you start out with very few charm slots and don't get a ton more by endgame, so I feel like it neuters a lot of experimentation and possibility when you just needed 1 more slot to make something work, but it's taken up by the mandatory thing that makes navigation possible. I know I've spent more time talking about negatives than positives in this review, and that's because you've heard all the positives forever. Hollow Knight is one of the most revered video games on God's mossy earth, and I don't have a whole lot of groundbreaking opinions on that end of the spectrum. I agree with all the reasons people think it's great, but for the double jumping and the mapping and Pantheon 5, I give mechanics a 90, which is still awesome. Now for fun. Is Hollow Knight fun? Please. If I had the ability to stay up for that many hours in a row, I would play through this entire game in one sitting. Its hooks would never leave my soft, inviting flesh. There's always new places to go, and new abilities and items to find and stuff to do. It is always compelling. The only times I got bored playing this game were the first half hour of each Pantheon 5 attempt, which you won't do till very end of the game anyway if you even choose to, and going through and grinding enough kills of each monster for the monster journal, because some of them require you to travel medium distances from bench to enemy spawn to bench again and repeat 14 times while slack-jawed, which is another thing you don't need to do unless you're going for the platinum. If you're not a completionist, you will have fun 100% of the time, unless you get lost or something, I guess, which does happen. So I give fun a 95. And now for the overall score, which is not an aggregate of previous scores because some things are weighted differently. I'm giving Hollow Knight, not Silksong, a 94 out of 100. It's got some annoyances, but 8 years later, it still deserves to be heralded as one of the greatest indie games of all time. And that's going to do it for this game graph. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, again, like, share, and subscribe. Watch all my other videos with Quick Slash and Steady Body on, and I'll see you guys next time.